It's time for the Parent Memoirs.
So a new justice is assigned to the case, and his name is Richard G. In some of the videos I watched, they pronounce it Gee because it's spelled G-E-E. But in the Australian documentary, they pronounce it G. So Justice G.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
He's intolerant as fuck when it comes to Leonard.
Good.
He went to seminary at first. He was a deeply religious person, didn't suffer fools. He was dedicated. He was actually a lay minister in his church. He had a wife, Helen, and a little boy, Stephen, and a little girl, Allison. Now, he was appointed to the court the day after Opus was murdered, and his lifelong goal was to be a judge, but he was kind of hesitant at first because he felt like that was a really crummy way of becoming a judge. Really?
Yeah.
That's sad. But he eventually took the role. Now, there's a gap here where nothing happens for a couple years. It's about 4 years. Okay.
Okay.
So all that happened in 1980. In 1981, Justice G rules that the home that both Leonard and Andrea had purchased needed to be sold.
Okay.
I don't quite understand why he wouldn't let Leonard just buy her out of the house. He could have given her the money,
maybe
for her half of the house.
Maybe the judge didn't feel like he would abide to it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he would
that's-
just be a prick and be like, "Fuck you, no."
That's a good point, because honestly, their experience with him,
Right.
erring on the side of him being potentially a prick is highly likely. Highly plausible at
Yes.
that point. So he says the house needs to be sold, the proceeds split. This beyond upset Leonard. This was his castle. This was his domain. No judge was going to tell him he couldn't live there. Good Lord. So for 4 years, it's pretty much quiet. Leonard continues to be difficult, and he still will not. He keeps delaying the sale of the house.
Of course.
When they send people to try to do an evaluation on it, he kicks them off the property, won't let them in. He's still continuing to do the shit with Trudy, where he's just taking her and not giving her back, or taking her from school, and just being a fucking shit.
Yeah.
Good Lord. So in between that point, there is a coroner's inquest into Justice Opus and Stephen Blanchard's death, where Kristen actually comes, Judge Opus's widow. She comes to court. She didn't know that there was a suspect. She didn't know the name Leonard Warwick until she showed up at court that day. And she found him to be terrifying.
Yeah.
Just his mere presence.
Right.
But the coroner's inquest doesn't really go anywhere.
Okay.
Now, throughout 1983 and 1984, Leonard avoids getting served with papers that Justice G had issued, basically evicting him from the house, right? He's refusing to answer the door. At one point, they show up at his job, and he locks himself in the bathroom like a teenage girl, refusing to come out. He's leading them on these wild chases. It's ridiculous. When he would show up to court, he would not have a lawyer, or he would be unprepared, and it was just a mess. And Justice G was just getting more and more pissed off.
Yeah.
So at one point, Leonard kept Trudy for too long. Andrea alerted him, and Justice G had enough, and he sent federal and state police with a warrant to basically storm the house, get her, and bring her back to her mother. As you can imagine, Leonard was upset.
Right.
And the next court date was set for March 6th. On March 6th, it's about 1:30 in the morning, and Justice G was home asleep. His wife had some sort of serious heart issue going on, and she was currently in the hospital.
Okay.
Thank Christ she was in the hospital.
Yeah.
His 2 children, Allison and Stephen, were in the home asleep. And at 1:30 in the morning, a bomb goes off and destroys their house, to the point where they said that, and I even saw pictures of it, you would just think you were looking at just a pile of rubble. You wouldn't even be able to tell it was a house. Like, it was bad.
Crazy. Yeah.
And a giant, like one of those giant, like timber support beams had landed on Justice G's bed right where Helen, his wife, usually slept. It would have crushed and killed her instantly, more than likely. But she was in the hospital. Thank God. And looking at the house at first.
Thank God is right.
Exactly. Looking at the house at first, they thought there's no way anybody survived. But miraculously, Justice G was seriously injured. His legs were shredded to hell. His children were cut. There were some serious injuries, but they were going to be okay. And it was just an absolute miracle that they were okay. Now, their next court date was for March 6th, and that bombing happened at 1:30 a.m. on March 6th. All right. So police go question Justice G. Who do you think could have done this? Justice G's like, Leonard. It's fucking Leonard. Once again.
Right?
Fucking
Yeah.
Leonard. Ugh. Once again, they do a search. They don't find anything. He has no alibi, and he won't talk.
Oh, God.
Great. Yeah, I know. Like I said, this is exhausting. And we're not even, like, we're only halfway through, okay? So on April 14th, I know, right? On April 14th, a bomb goes off at 10:20 p.m. at the family court building in Parramatta. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Now, miraculously, they think that the bomb was supposed to go off at 10:20 a.m., but it went off at 10:20
when people
p.m.
were there.
Exactly. Yeah. So he was totally willing to kill children. Like, didn't matter. Like, whatever. Now, a janitor they called him a caretaker, which I think is the way that they refer to, like, janitorial workers. Had just left, like, almost like 30 seconds before that bomb went off. Like, they got lucky as hell. Yeah. So a new justice is assigned to their case, Andrea and Leonard's case. His name is Justice Ray Watson. Now, Justice Watson had been married once before. I can't remember if he was divorced or if she passed, but he ended up remarrying this lovely woman named Pearl. Pearl worked in the counseling office of the family court, and he was a justice. They had a nice little blended family. His children basically describe Pearl as having loved them back to life, like after, like their family had. I'm pretty sure his first wife passed.
Gotcha.
But they just adored Pearl. She was an amazing, amazing woman by all accounts. Justice Watson had restricted Leonard's visitation because, once again, he's being a shit. And on the morning of July 4th, 1984, Pearl and Ray, Justice Watson, were getting ready to leave for work. There were some conflicting stories about why she was the one who opened the door first, because they worked at the same building. Mm-hmm. One person thought that she would always open the door first because of what happened to Justice Opus, that, you know, he opened the door and somebody shot him.
Right.
Their theory was that she would always open the door first because if somebody was there, she could shut it and they wouldn't get to shoot her husband, basically. Another person said that this was just part of a cute little ritual that they had where she would open the door, he would go out, kiss her on the cheek, like, have a good day, dear. And then he would keep walking and then she would shut the door behind her and
They'd go. Yeah. Okay.
Well, she went to open the door. She opened it just a few centimeters and there was a bunch of sticks of explosives in a bag that was set on their doorstep. There was a string attached to the zipper, and when you opened the door, because the string was attached to the door, it unzipped the bag, set off the detonator, and a bomb went off. Justice Watson survived. He was injured, but he survived. Unfortunately, Pearl was literally from her calves down were still in front of the door, but the rest of her body was blown through a brick wall.
Oh.
That literally had like an imprint of her body. Like, just, ugh. was awful.
That's sad.
It was awful. Her stepdaughter especially was just devastated. She was like, anybody but Pearl. Please tell me it wasn't Pearl. Like,
Right.
this just isn't fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Justice Watson is like, it's fucking Leonard. Like, don't really know what to tell you. It's fucking Leonard. Now, at this point, Andrea had a new legal counsel. His name was Gary Watts. Okay. Gary Watts had advised her. He knew the history, and he had advised her to get a little bit more tough with Leonard. Like, this is bullshit what he's doing.
Right.
So one day he shows up at the house, unannounced, not on visiting day, and tried to take Trudy. And she said to him, my new counselor, Gary Watts, says that blah, 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 blah. Right? He actually punches her and tries to take Trudy. She manages to snatch her back, gets in the house, locks the door. Leonard leaves, screaming and cursing as he's driving away. She calls her sister Judy and is like, we got to get the fuck out. Like, he's going to kill me. Like, yeah, it's going to happen. So she starts making arrangements to leave. But now Leonard knows her new lawyer's name.
Right.
I'll give you 3 guesses as to who was next on his hit list.
The new lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of surprised that at some point the lawyers weren't like, oh, sorry, ma'am, I can't represent you.
Oh, no, they were.
Oh, were they?
They were. It was hard to find Gary. And I didn't quite understand this because I read one article that said Gary was also a judge at the court. So I guess he was like a judge and a lawyer at this, like doing both. And I think that he agreed to represent her simply because she didn't really have any other options. People wouldn't, like, they knew he was a suspect and he was getting away with it. And it was hard as hell to find anybody to help her.
Yeah.
Oh, God. So Gary had recently sold his house. And whoever had purchased his house was renting it out to 3 siblings, one of whom's name was Peter. And on the morning of, actually don't know the actual date on this one. It was in 1985. Peter goes out to his car because he's got to take it in to get it registered. So he was like changing out a filter or whatever. And he lifts up the hood of his car. They call it the bonnet of the car. Mm-hmm. He lifts up the hood and lo and behold, there's a bomb attached to his engine. And he's like, holy fuck. Calls the police. But the police are at first confused because they know there have been all these bombings that are connected to the family court. But this dude isn't connected to the family court at all. So at first they're like, what the fuck?
Right.
What the hell? What's going on? But they quickly put it together that the phone book still has Gary Watts listed as this being his address. And it's like, oh shit, this was meant for Gary. Like, fuck. So Gary quits. He's just like, fuck this. And Andrea is just like, okay, we got to get out. That's it.
Right.
Now, her sister, after Stephen had passed, the little brother Stephen, she had found comfort in a new church. She had become a Jehovah's Witness, right? Mm-hmm. And she found it to be very comforting and soothing. And Andrea went with her to a few meetings. So did Trudy. Leonard did not like this. He was like, you keep my daughter away from those Jehovah people. Like, he just didn't like them. But Judy reaches out to the church and asks for help to get, because one of the things that Gary had told Andrea was, get out of Sydney and don't even tell me where you're going. Like, so Judy reaches out to the church, and the church members, trying to be helpful, one of them takes over the house that they're renting, and the rest of them move her like out of Sydney quick. Like, it's like a day. And they end up going up to a place called Forrester, which is, I Googled it, it's 99 kilometers north of Sydney.
Okay.
Now Leonard shows up to try to take Trudy again, and he finds out that they're gone. And he flips the fuck out.
Right.
And he immediately suspects the Jehovah's Witness community, because he knows Judy's a member, because he's thinking she needed help to move this quickly. Like, and she isn't, have a ton of friends and know a whole bunch of people. So that was like a logical conclusion for him.
Right.
So he starts like stalking the Jehovah's Witness members, calling them, harassing them, and they don't really tell him anything, or at least most of them don't. One person says, "Oh, I think they went up north." That's all they said. But this tipped him off that like, "Oh, they did help. They're hiding my wife and my daughter from me." Like, and he's just getting more and more and more fucking agitated. So one day the Jehovah's Witness, like the people who work at the Kingdom Hall where this happened, this was at the, what was it called? The Casula Kingdom Hall. They show up and somebody had broken into the church. They had broken a window, but nothing was stolen. Nothing was really vandalized or disturbed. Whoever had done it had cut themselves, and there was a ton of blood, apparently. So they call the police. The police dismiss it as local homeless people just looking for a place to like sleep. And they take a sample of the blood, but this is 1985. We didn't have DNA testing at this point. Like,
right.
So they take a sample of the blood, but they don't really do anything. Nothing was taken.
Yeah.
And the only thing messed up was a window. And I'm like, okay. So about a week later, somebody breaks into that very same window. Once again, nothing's really done because nothing's disturbed. Apparently the thought process, most likely of Leonard, is, I can find maybe some paperwork or something that might show where they went, right?
Right.
But after that, I believe it was the same morning after the second break-in was reported, in the middle of church, the middle of a service with 100+ people in it, a bomb goes off in the church.
Of course. With
children, and Jesus. It killed the minister of the church. His name was Graham Wicks. But I know it doesn't sound this way, but the building was destroyed, but he was the only fatality. And they got damn lucky, because the physics of a bomb in particular, one of the dangers of a bomb is when it displaces the air, it creates a vacuum, and things can suck back in, and buildings can basically collapse in and crush everybody. But for some reason, this bomb made the building explode out rather than in. So there was a ton of injuries, but only one fatality. Okay. Everybody's fucking horrified, of course.
Right.
Judy feels insanely guilty. She feels like,
of course,
she brought this on. Andrea feels incredibly guilty. Like,
yeah,
because they're not sociopaths. Like, even though it's not their fault, they feel like it is.
Well, yeah, because she's bringing all these people into, not that she's bringing them into it, but, it's because of her situation that she has to have all these people involved.
Right. And the people who were renting the house that Andrea had been renting, they actually pull the cops aside at the scene, and they tell them, like, we think we know who did this. It was this dude, and he showed up at the house and, like, was harassing us to find out where they went. And the cops immediately are like, you need to get the fuck out of that house. And
right,
like,
yeah.
And they were like, why? And they were like, because we think he's the family court bomber. You need to get the fuck out. Like, yeah. Oh, shit. Now, the police also go question Andrea and Judy. Who could have done this? You guys. It's fucking Leonard. Like, it's fucking Leonard. Like, this is the point in Bailey Sarian's video where she freaks the fuck out, and I understand it. Like, at this point, it's like, who do you think it is? It's fucking Leonard. Oh my God.
Right?
Damn it.
Man, it's infuriating.
It is. But once again, the laws, there's no proof of anything. They go to, now, at this point, though, you're going to think this is funny. At this point, they go to question Leonard again and again. Yep. They find no proof. He maintains his right to silence, blah, blah, blah. But he did have he did have a new quote unquote girlfriend. She still maintains that they weren't in a relationship, but they seem to be. Who fucking knows? But this is the part that's going to make you laugh. She was a blabbermouth, and she was telling him shit. Like, yeah, Leonard's been looking for Trudy and Judy, and Andrea, and he's getting pissed off and blah, blah, blah. He eventually shuts her up. But she has a hatred for the cops, right? And she is described as, quote, by the cops, a low-class girl with tattoos and a rough manner.
Oh, man. Well, us girls are like that.
See, there you go. And Bailey Sarian's video, she's covered in tattoos, and she kind of like, after she says that, she zooms the camera in on her own face, and then she's like, this feels like a personal attack. Like,
right?
and I read it, and I thought about telling the story to you, and I was like, Jessica's going to think that's funny. She's a rather low-class girl with tattoos and a rough manner. I was like, ooh. I just thought about, I can't remember the supervisor that called you spirited. Like, Jessica's very spirited. I can't remember that. Who was that? I don't remember.
I don't know.
But yeah.
Carly would probably know.
Yeah, that's true. So her name is Lorraine, and they still to this day kind of believe that Lorraine held the key, like, because a woman had been calling around to church members as well as Leonard. They did find a list in Leonard's house of church members' names and phone numbers, but that was about it. When the press and the media and everybody were finally like alerted that this, or I don't know if they were alerted or they kind of figured it out after a while, that all of these things were connected. The family, because for a long time, nobody wanted to believe like that this was somebody who was targeting the court. It was too uncomfortable. They wanted to believe that Kristen was responsible for, David's shooting because it made them feel better that they weren't in danger. But after it started to become this pattern that couldn't be ignored and the public knew about it, et cetera, believe it or not, if you remember, we talked about those men's advocacy groups. They regarded this bomber as a hero.
That's
because it at a certain point you realized like, oh, they are targeting the court specifically, the judges. And the other thing that fed that, unfortunately, was when the law was passed in 1976, you had a ton of like conservatives and church leaders who felt that this was, immoral and awful and blah, blah, blah. And they were out there saying that, well, I mean, what did you expect? This was bound to happen. And it was like, why was it bound to happen? Like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't bound to happen. Okay? You're assholes. Sorry.
Right.
Like, the world has changed. Like, I don't know what the thought that, no. So you had these men calling him a folk hero, and you had these religious leaders and conservatives saying that, not justifying it, but saying, I don't want to say that they were saying it was justified, but they kind of were. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And because of this public reaction, right, that they, a lot of people were sympathetic with the court, but you did have a good chunk of people that weren't. And the fear was copycats, right? Because if you think about it, like, there was that sniper from DC years and years and years ago that was killing like random people just for no reason. And it turned out once they caught him that his plan was to actually kill his ex-wife and make it look like she was just part of this random sniper. Like, that it was all to cover up the premeditated murder of his wife, of his ex-wife. They were kind of concerned that other bombers would start to do this shit, right? Because they were like, oh, I can judge, my judge too. I can blow him up. So they kept a lot of details back from the press on the specifics of the bomb, so they could like weed out copycats. But it was absolutely a fear.
That makes sense.
But because of that and the press reaction and the public reaction, people who worked at the family court just started to quit. or they just wouldn't show up, or they would just work from home, or, I mean, they were terrified because nobody, like, they're like, am I going to be, even if I'm not involved, even after Leonard was publicly identified, like, even if I'm not involved in Leonard's case, what if somebody else gets this idea and it's me next? Like, they were afraid that he was emboldening other men or people to do this. And it was like, I mean, honestly, understandable.
Yeah, that's a good fear. I mean, it makes sense, unfortunately.
And especially when, like, especially with Justice Watson, with Pearl, his wife died, not him. Like,
right. That was messed up.
and to be fair, they did have other suspects that they chased down. There were some pretty outlandish, like, because Len Warwick was not out there, like, tooting his horn before this and telling anybody that would listen. Like, not in the way that some men did. Like, this one dude, he was, like, making pamphlets and shit and, like, passing them out to other people, like, about how awful the family court was and just this absolute vendetta against it. But, I mean, everybody they looked at, they looked at quite a few. The book goes into details on each of them. Like, they were just like, nope, he's got alibis or whatever. Eventually, they figure out the only connection to all of these people is Len Warwick. Is fucking Leonard. Fucking Leonard. And they said, like, it is statistically that it's not Leonard. And this was just a coincidence that he's the only connection to all these people, was like one in, like, I think they said like 800 million or something stupid like that. And it was like, okay, pretty sure.
That's crazy.
It's fucking Leonard.
Right.
Fucking Leonard. Leonard does an interview when he's named publicly as a suspect. That's kind of terrifying. Like, you can tell, like, he's very controlled, but at one point, like, he gets this smile on his face that you could tell he's, like, thrilled he's getting away with it. He's beyond thrilled. One of the creepy things about the interview that he did, and they have the transcripts in the books of, like, his interviews where he's, like, just refusing to answer any questions. Like, and it's exhausting to read through it. There were many times I had to just keep skipping past because it was just constant. Yeah. Like, I maintain my right to silence. I maintain my right to silence. I maintain my right to silence. Like, oh my God. But in the interview with the TV station, they asked him, they were like, would you be willing to take a polygraph? Like, with us as, like, the news. Yeah. And he was like, why? And they were like, and then he said, it's my understanding it's not admissible in court. Right? And they were like, well, we don't know. We would have to look into that. Like, he was asking, like, if you give me a polygraph, can you turn around and give it to the police as if they had given it to me? Right?
Right. Yeah.
And they were like, we don't know. And he's like, well, if it's not admissible, what's the point? No. And you could just, and this kind of like round and round about this polygraph for a minute just really gave you that glimpse, because he was very controlled throughout the whole interview. But that was the point where you really saw that difficult Leonard, like, poke his head out.
Yeah.
You're right. Mm-hmm. And at this point, Andrea is living with her mother, Marjorie. Again, fuck this narcissistic bitch. She doesn't like kids, and she's now got this 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, however old. I think Trudy was like 6 or 7 at this time, running around. She's, a loud kid, and Marjorie doesn't like it. So Marjorie is like harassing Andrea, believe it or not, telling her, just give him the child. This will stop if you just give.
Seriously?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And everybody just wears Andrea down, and she gives Trudy to Leonard. And like I said, I will not tolerate one comment from anybody about how all these people are dying around her.
Right. Yeah.
Like, number one. And number two, she was afraid that Leonard was going to kill her and maybe even end up killing Trudy just to keep Andrea from having her. Like, she was terrified. And you could tell it was just an agonizing decision.
Well, yeah.
And she felt like if he's doing all this stuff to get her, maybe he will protect her, maybe because he's so adamant about this. Like, I mean, it was kind of a gamble, but honestly, she couldn't handle the guilt anymore. She really just couldn't.
Yeah.
He broke her down.
Yeah. That's bound to happen at some point, unfortunately.
And think about it. Like, you not only are you afraid he's going to kill you, you're afraid he's going to kill you and get away with it.
Well, yeah, because he's getting away with everything else. So what is his relationship like with Trudy? Is he good with her, or okay?
Well, according to her, she would, like, during her childhood, like, he was a good father. He loved her, but he was very possessive and very, strict. And in her early childhood, like, that seemed to be okay, but we'll get to a little bit later. But there were things that were like, okay, he would hide her in at the, like, bottom of a closet, right?
Okay.
When anybody came to try to get her, like when he kept her for too long,
Yeah.
he would make her hide. And sometimes they would be there for like a while. And he would make her hide in a closet. And she remembers that. When people would call, he would, like, have her pick up the phone so he didn't have to, like, talk to them. And she was like, 3 or 4. And it was like, she's just picking up the phone and playing with it. Like,
Right. Yeah.
like, okay. Yeah. He used her as, we used to see it when I would listen to collections calls. People would have their kids pick up the phone.
Right.
And, like, take a message.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
Yeah.
Now, Andrea gives over Trudy. She still has visitation, but the attacks stop completely. What a coinky dink. The investigation continues, but the thing that at a certain point, the police do bring all of this information to, like, what seems like the equivalent of, like, a grand jury to see if they can get an indictment.
Okay.
But the big thing that's holding them up is they can't figure out, A, if this is him, where did he get the explosive material? And B,
Okay.
how does he know how to make a bomb like this? Because these bombs were very unique, right?
Okay.
In his time in the military, there was a rumor that he took an explosives course, but there was no proof of it, right? And where did he get the material? They couldn't ever. And when they searched his property, they never found any indication of it. So where was his bomb making, like, lair?
Right.
So where did he build them? Where did he get the expertise? And where did he get the materials? They could never figure that out. So this just it basically just became this cold case that they would try to, like, investigate, but they never could get anywhere, right?
Okay.
So by 2010, 2011, I believe, the laws had changed in Australia to where it was easier to charge somebody based on circumstantial evidence.
Okay.
So a cold case unit had been established, and they were looking back through some of these cases. Well, around the same time, the reporters that I talked about that did the expose and the book, they had gotten, like, a tip from somebody about it, like somebody who had been a witness at one point, and they start looking into it. And the reporter, she didn't actually know the story because a lot of people were afraid to talk at all.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So she starts looking into it, and eventually they find some pretty interesting information. Number one, they find out that the rumor was, at one point, the cops started following Leonard 24/7.
Okay.
But he figured out pretty quick they were following him.
Yeah.
And he would do shit to fuck with them. He'd drive in circles. He would walk up to their car and offer them coffee. Like, just being a dick, of course. But at one point, he disappeared into some, like, bushland that was, like, bordered his father's home and lost him. he knew, because that's where he grew up, he knew that land very, very well. So eventually they find out that there was a cave that was nicknamed Jimmy the Black's Cave, that apparently a bunch of teenagers had found like weapons and explosives in this cave, on this land that Leonard knew very, very well. Right? So there was nothing there by the time the reporters got like a guide to take them out there, but there was nothing there. But it was pretty well understood, like, okay, this is probably where he did this. That's number one.
Yeah.
Then, where did he get the explosives? Well, right near his father's home, there are a few mines and quarries. When you're mining and you're doing stuff like that, there are explosives. And guess what? Around the time of the bombings, there had been robberies at the quarry. And guess what was stolen? The exact same bomb materials that were used.
Oh, boy.
Now, the third, where did he get this expertise? Like, he didn't get it in the army. He was a cook. He never went to war. Like, he's a fireman, but they don't really teach you how to make bombs. Like,
okay,
as a fireman, I don't think, anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe how to diffuse them. I don't know if you'd have to learn how to build them. I don't know.
But then they find out what Leonard Warwick's father does for a living. He was an explosives expert in the mines.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Nope.
So this whole time, the explosives expert is right there?
Yep.
And so how long has it been since this started at this point?
That they found that out?
How many years since... Well, yeah, from when the first bomb went off to when they're just now finding this out.
About...
like 30 years or so or whatever?
27 years about. From 1984 to 2013 or 2012, I believe, is when they found that out. So, yeah. The reporter who wrote the book, she says, I call Ross excited with the new revelations and said, guess what Warwick's old man did for a living? I start. He was a bloody shot firer at the local mine. Okay, a shot firer in the minerals industry assembles, positions, and detonates explosives at mining sites to dislodge rocks or soil. They still don't know if his father knew,
right,
or if he just taught him this stuff about explosives when he was little.
Right.
More than likely his father did not know. I don't think his father knew. I think he taught him how to do this shit when he was a little kid.
Yeah, just like hey, let's bond over some, explosives.
Boys bond over guns and blowing shit up. I'm sorry.
Right.
They really
do. Didn't you say previously that the cops had gone to Leonard's dad's house because that's where they got one of the 22s for testing?
But they never asked him what he did for a living. They didn't know. That's why some people... Right. Now, the cops throughout this... Something else that was kind of interesting going around at the same time was the cops... The police force was going through this incredible period of, like, corruption being exposed. So there was a lot... One of the lead detectives was actually suspended during the investigation over an unrelated matter. And there was all this shit going on. Like... There is a lot. Everybody should really read the book. It's a fascinating kind of look at the whole story. But, oh my God. So the report airs, and the cold case unit, they actually go back and they have the blood evidence that they took.
From the church?
Uh-huh.
Nice.
And Leonard would not give a blood sample, of course. But now Trudy was of age. So they tested it against Trudy's blood. And it came back that it had to be one of her parents. Clearly wasn't Andrea. So who could it have been? They found out later that after if you remember, he broke into the church twice, right? Right. Once, and then like a week later, a second time. The first time, he cut himself and bled all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. Well, come to find out later that right after that date of the first break-in, Leonard was sporting a giant cut on his face.
Really?
Uh-huh. Now, he told and they had witness like testimony in court about this. He told one person that he cut himself shaving, and he told another person that he fell off his bike.
Oh boy.
So like when you're telling conflicting stories, that's one of those things that makes you more suspicious about, okay, what really happened.
Right.
And for me, I wonder if he showed up the first time with the bomb, but when he cut himself, he thought it would look suspicious.
Maybe.
So he waited, and that's why he came back like a week later. Like, I don't know.
No, but that would make sense.
Like, what if the bomb didn't go off, and and they see that there's this broken window with this blood everywhere that he can't clean up. Like,
right.
And then they go talk to him, like, he's sporting a cut. And enough people from the church have seen him. The church really did become like, the church members that he had been like stalking and harassing leading up to the bombing, they really did become the primary witnesses for a lot of this because they had seen him. Like he went to some of their homes and like sat across from them and like interrogated them on like, where's Judy? Where's Andrea? Where's Trudy? Like, where did you take them? What did you do with them? And I was like, dude, Jesus. So, but once again, the cops didn't see him at the time. They saw him after the bombing. So they didn't necessarily, I don't know how healed up it was at that point. So they didn't necessarily know that, like, he had this.
Interesting.
Smart. Now, at this point, this is what's, believe it or not, this to me, I might be a horrible person for saying this because I'm through all of these deaths, right? I'm about to say that this is the worst part of the story for me. And it technically is a part of the story where nobody died. But still, I find this part of the story to just be horrifying.
Okay.
She lived with Leonard from the time she was 7 until she was 15. Why until she was 15? Well, Leonard got remarried. And the new wife and Trudy didn't get along. So after doing everything he did to get her, he pretty much sided with his new mail order bride from the Philippines over his own daughter and kicked her out. All that. You did all that.
Right. Just
and
to
fuck her over
for
a woman. He, according to the book, if I'm remembering this part of the book correctly, he went to the Philippines to actually pick up another girl, but it didn't work out, so he brought this one back instead. She's not a mail order bride. In my opinion, it sounds like she's a mail order bride. Okay?
Right.
I don't know how else.
In those circumstances, that's fair.
Like, I don't know what to say. So, Trudy says in the interview that was done with her and Andrea, like, because they didn't talk to the press or anybody either. They were terrified. She said the last time she saw her father was at her wedding. I believe she was like 21. She's married. She has her own children now. She said it was a very stressful day, like, because her mother and father saw each other, and he's just not a pleasant person. He is an awful, awful person just to be around. Like, people who, when they talked to his coworkers were like, yeah, he's a dick. Like, he'll be talking to you, and for some unknown reason, you will offend him, and he will just walk away from the conversation in the middle of talking. Like, he's just an asshole. The only things they could tell him about, he doesn't socialize with anybody personally. They said he likes to hunt and he likes pornography. That's all they could tell him about him.
Aw, man.
I was like,
an awful person all around.
I was like, there's nothing wrong with porn, but if that's all your coworkers can tell people about you,
then how much porn are you watching at work?
Thank you very much. It's a little weird. Like, okay.
Right. You're right, because there's nothing wrong with pornography, but exactly like you said, you got to be watching it at work for people to know that that's what you do all day.
Right, but if people at my job were like, yeah, Laura's got 2 kids and a husband and a dog, and she likes to paint, and she loves threesome pornography. Like, she's really into, like, bukkake films. Like, what the fuck? Like,
right?
Oh, and she loves reading. Like, what the fuck? Okay.
Oh, that's why you like the audiobooks, because you can listen and watch at the same time.
See, you figured me out. Damn it. I revealed to you my dark secret. Jesus Christ. Oh, my God.
Oh.
So finally, in 2015, They charge him with 32 charges. The trial takes years. He's such a piece of shit. Like, he's flipping off the camera in the middle of court, of course.
Yeah.
Like,
I was looking at some pictures of him while you were telling the story, and every single one hits like he's pushing up his glasses, but he's doing it with the middle finger and shit. And I'm like,
oh yeah, he's a
man.
dick. He is a dick, dude. The court stuff just keeps going on and on and on. Like, he claims that he doesn't have a lawyer and he can't afford a lawyer, and then his lawyer was bullying him. I'm like, right, because you seem like the type of person who can get bullied. Number one. And number two,
right.
It's pretty rich hearing you saying somebody was bullying you. Fuck off, right? Whatever. But eventually he is convicted of just about... Do you need to go check on him?
If you don't care about the noise, I'm good. They're dogs. Okay. They bark.
Sorry if y'all hear barking. It's our home.
It's just...
Like,
yep.
Don't know what to tell you. Eventually, he does have the trial by a judge. The judge finds him guilty on almost everything. Unfortunately, he didn't find him guilty of the murder of Stephen Blanchard, the brother. There just wasn't there wasn't enough proof there. They just and that was really devastating to the family.
Well, yeah.
Obviously, like, they finally got him, but it's just sad. Unfortunately, when Andrea left the home when she was 15.
Andrea left home when she was 15.
No, Trudy left home. The little girl.
Okay, Trudy. Okay.
Trudy,
I'm sorry, I thought you said Andrea.
I might have said Andrea. I'm sorry. So Trudy left home.
Okay, so Trudy left.
But she didn't want to go live with Andrea because Andrea was living with a boyfriend who had, unbeknownst to Andrea, been molesting Trudy. So Trudy was taken in by some family friends. Eventually she told her mother. Her mother reported that piece of shit and he went to prison.
Good.
Thank God.
So sure, they can convict him
of,
but can't convict somebody else of multiple
I know, right?
bombings and murders.
Right. So eventually he got sentenced to like life in prison. He's now 72 years old, et cetera, et cetera. But believe it or not, there's one more mystery yet to be solved. Believe it or not.
Okay. What is that?
The mystery of what happened to Leonard Warwick's little sister. Right after Leonard Warwick's father passed away, he had left everything 50-50 between Elaine and Leonard. Right after that, Elaine has dropped off the face of the planet. Nobody has seen her. Like, every piece of identifying information that you would have, that a person hasn't been used or touched. It's like she disappeared off the face of the planet, and guess who got all of Daddy's money?
Leonard.
Fucking Leonard. So they still don't know what happened to her. That's still a big fat old mystery as to what happened to Elaine.
And how long ago was that?
That was, when was that? I believe.
Yes. Eileen Muriel Warwick. Eileen Muriel Warwick, yes. Where is she? I don't know.
Where's that?
In 1993, the father of Len and Eileen died. In his will, he left his son and daughter assets to be split evenly between them. Eileen hasn't been seen since.
So since 1993. Yep. God. So if you think about it, like, he got away with it for so fucking long. Like, he did the first two with guns, and then there was like a 4-year period of nothing. And then one bomb, got away with it. 2 bombs, got away with it. 3 bombs, got away with it. 4 bombs, got away with it. Like, it was just one after another, and then he got what he wanted, and everything stopped. I mean, he knew at this point all he had to do was keep his mouth shut, because they couldn't they couldn't do anything. All they had was circumstantial evidence. They didn't know about the cave. They didn't know where he got the explosives, and they didn't know where he got the know-how. So if you have somebody like that it's like a child continuing to get away with things. Like, they're just like, eventually he blew up a building with 100+ people in it. Like,
yeah.
Why? Because he got away with it the first 3 times or 4 times, however the fuck. Like, it's It really is stunning. And it took forever. He just got sentenced like last September
Right.
of 2020.
So he's life in prison. Does Australia have the death penalty?
No, they don't, but they do have life in prison. So he is in prison, and you can tell just I feel really bad. Allison, who was Justice G's daughter, the justice whose wife had been in the hospital, she was 12 at the time of the bombing. Severe PTSD. Like,
well, yeah.
Because what they did was, and I understood this inclination, but I don't know if it was a good idea. I understand it, but I don't know if it was a good idea. They bulldozed what was like the rubble of what the house was, and they rebuilt it on the same spot as kind of like an act of defiance. But unfortunately, she was 12. It was very much like, but the bomber knows where we live. What if he comes back? So it just left her in this constant state of fear. And it was something that she never really, like, she was interviewed for the book and she talks about it like it's something she struggled with her whole life. Like, this man left this trail of just destruction. Like, that you just can't even imagine. Like, I was stunned I'd never heard of this story. And I have a lot of theories. You know, it was Australia. It was the 80s. We didn't have the internet yet. By the time we did have the internet, a lot of people had forgotten about it. And the people who hadn't wouldn't talk. Like,
well, yeah. Nobody terrified.
Exactly. Like, he just kept getting away with it. Like, and I honestly, Andrea and Trudy, I don't know where they are now. And I don't really care to know too much. Like, they've just obviously been through it.
Well, yeah.
Good Lord. How much can, two people go through? Like, and Trudy says in the interview, she's like, all of these people were murdered over me. Like, to put that on your daughter knowingly, like, you knew you were a suspect. You knew, like, everybody thought you were the person who did it. Like, you knowingly put that on your daughter. Like, it's guilt of a good person. Like, she didn't do anything wrong. Andrea didn't do anything wrong. Like, yeah. So I'm going to put some links to some domestic abuse, resources and things like that. You can get out if it's you. Just if you're listening to this, there are resources out there. Obviously, a lot has changed since the 80s, and this is in Australia. So, you can get out. You can reach out for help. But yeah, that's the bonkers ass story that has been like consuming my brain as to like how just how like how did this go on for this long?
Well, and you have to wonder, like, for any of the detectives or investigators that were working on it, like, retrospectively, they're probably like, how did we not see that before?
Oh yeah, they were the one cop that was interviewed in that special. It haunted him because Leonard Warwicks was the one that got away. Like, he knew it was him, and it haunted him. Yeah. But yeah, that's the story. He's behind bars.
Right. Path of destruction.
All right.
Well, hopefully the toilet paper in prison is worse than the government stolen toilet paper.
I hope your ass bleeds for the rest of your life, sir.
Right? Or maybe they just don't give him any toilet paper, so he endures a life of itchy, burning asshole.
There you go. All right, my dear. Well, that is the end of our episode. We'll be back with our normal, just kind of talking about being moms here soon. But I think we'll wrap this up. So until next time, I'm Laura Mack.
I'm Jessica James.
Love your face.
I got it right. Sorry. Keep it sane. Waffle snatch out.
That needs to be the new everything. Like, waffle snatch out.
Okay.
I'm gonna sign my emails. Waffle snatch out.
There you go.
Hey, Parent Peeps. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes or on your favorite podcasting platform. Stay strong, mommies and daddies. Love your faces.